Hi everyone, this is Sir Gantt, back again with lesson 5 of my course in how to use Microsoft Project. I'm using the Project 2016 version, but everything I show you applies to earlier and to later versions of Microsoft Project as well. In this lesson, we're going to look at the things that we do with a schedule that we've put together before we commit to delivering against it. We need to make sure before we say to our project sponsor, here's the schedule we're going to be delivering against, that we have confidence in the schedule, that it makes sense, that we understand things like the critical path that runs through the schedule or critical paths. We also need to make sure that we are assigning the right amount of work to our resources, that we're not depending on over-allocated resources in order to come in on time. Most likely, if our resources are over-allocated, we will not meet our target dates. So fine-tuning, getting ready to deliver, and baselining our project schedule. Very specifically, what we're going to do is take a look at how Microsoft Project can show us easily which tasks in our schedule are critical, which ones are part of a critical path. Incidentally, for more discussion of the theory of criticality in scheduling, take a look at some of my other videos on my channel. It's fairly easy to find the ones that talk about critical path. As mentioned, Project can tell us which resources, if any, are over-allocated, identify to us situations where we're planning to use more of a resource's availability at a particular point in time than we actually have available. Maybe we're planning to use 2 developers for a particular week in the schedule at the same time, but we only have 1 available. We're going to look at what Project can tell us and how it can help us resolve those situations. We're going to look generally for schedule bottlenecks, look for any areas in the schedule where it just doesn't make sense, where too many things are happening at the same time, or where we are planning to do a lot of work over a period of time when we could expect a lot of resources to be coming and saying, I'd like to take next week off, please, maybe during the peak summer vacation times. We're also just going to double check our dates, make sure that the dates that we've assigned for the various activities make sense, that it really is realistic. Once we have our own confidence as the scheduler or project manager that the dates work and that we can really have confidence that we'll meet the target dates, then we'll look at how Project can baseline for us, how we can capture those dates so that inevitably, as we start delivering, some things take longer, some things take less time, and we have to change plans. We always have a good understanding of what the dates were that were approved in the first place. If you do like this lesson and any other lesson in the course, then any lesson that you like, please indicate that. Click the like button. And you always get asked by every YouTube presenter to subscribe to the channel, enable notifications. Well, please consider doing that. More importantly, there are lots of people out there who would like to know how to use Microsoft Project. Let them know about these videos. You might also like to buy me a coffee, or maybe not. But if you do, and you'd like to do so virtually, then one of the things you could do is to go to buymeacoffee.com/SirGantalot. If you do that, I'm very grateful. I'm grateful to the people who've done so already. But if you don't and just get value from the course, I'm grateful for that too. Talking about getting value from the course, the best way to approach the course, I would suggest, is firstly, make sure that the quality settings that you're watching on whatever device you're watching YouTube through are set to the highest available. But in terms of mechanics, if you can get another screen with Microsoft Project displayed on it, your own copy of Microsoft Project, whether that's another screen on the same computer or a different machine altogether, then what you can do is follow along as I demonstrate things to you. If I get ahead of you, then you can definitely pause, rewind, and replay. Just in passing, some of you may hold a PMI credential, Project Management Institute credential, such as a PMP, Project Management Professional, or one of the other credentials that they award. And for most of them, you have to gain professional development units over a 3-year period. And you can submit the fact that you've been watching these videos to claim some PDUs. You can do that under the education, online, digital media, etc. This set of categories here, this category path, would be the one to use. Okay, enough of all of that. Let's get into Microsoft Project. Now, to demonstrate reviewing a schedule that's being put together, what we're going to do is use one of the templates that are available from Microsoft Project. Very specifically, I'm going to go with this one here. And you can find that template by going to File and New. But it might be that in your organization, for whatever reason, these templates are not showing, or even on your own version of Microsoft Project. So when you go to File and New, where it says Search for Online Templates, just click in there and type Software Development Plan, and it will become available to you. If it is showing here already, then just click to select it, click one more time, and then we're going to start a project using this template. What I'm going to do specifically is I'm going to set a start date, and for no particular reason, I'm going to use February the 1st of 2022. That may be in the past for you. Doesn't matter. You can still create a schedule for a project starting on that date, and then you can hit Create. Now, this particular template has been created to open with a report showing at the top here, specifically a report of major activities, but down at the bottom with the Gantt chart showing. So we're just going to work with the Gantt chart for this exercise. If we click on View at the top here, we can uncheck Details, and then, again, on the View tab, just click Gantt chart over here. Now we've got the Gantt chart showing alone. Now this schedule has task 0 showing, the project summary task. On the Format tab, you can show or hide the project summary task. We're going to leave it showing. Very helpful when you're reviewing the overall schedule to have it available to you, displayed. A couple of other things. For now, I'm just going to pull this divider over a little bit so that we can see more of the graphical area. And I'm also going to change the time scale here. A project which lasts the better part of 5 months, having day by day, it's fine, but I'm going to zoom out a little bit. So I'm going to go to, if I go to the View tab, I'm going to change the time scale and make sure that it does say weeks if it doesn't already say that for you. Right, so let's go to weeks. And then the last thing I'm going to do, right now, you can probably see that I'm just showing summary tasks. I've got task 1, and then there's task 7. Well, obviously there's tasks 2 through 6, which are not currently displayed. I could just open up each one here. But to do that quickly, on the View tab, I'm going to click on Outline and show all subtasks. So now let's just take an overall view through this schedule. As we can see, it runs from the date that we said we wanted it to start to the middle of June. And it is broken into the type of phases that you would expect with a software development project. We've got a scope section where we're looking at requirements, where we're making sure that we've laid the groundwork to move into doing analysis and gathering requirements and documenting them. Then moving into design. Then we've got development, where we start producing code. We've also got testing happening. We develop our test plans, and once the code is available over here, you can see that testing is happening. We've got unit and integration testing happening down here. There's also a training component where we've got trainers putting together training specifications and materials, and then delivering training towards the end of the training phase here. And of course, in order to train, there needs to be code available to train people against. We've also got a set of documentation activities going on. We also run a pilot here. So we run a pilot towards the latter part of the project once all the code is available. And we've trained people on how to use the tool. And then once we have done our pilot, and we think about doing some final deployment, a post-implementation review, and then the project is complete. So my assessment of this schedule is it's quite well put together. It's the type of activities I would expect to see. A couple of best practices are being complied with in here. For example, we don't have dependencies hanging off the summary tasks. It's not good practice to put dependencies on summary tasks for a number of reasons, not least that you can very easily end up with circular dependencies. So what's happening instead is that from the previous phase, the last milestone in that phase is what is driving the first activity in the deployment phase here. Another best practice that you can see is that the tasks are written in verb-noun formulation. Train the support staff. If I go up here, obtain user feedback. And that's good practice. It's not a universal golden rule, but it is a good practice. On the other hand, milestones can be more abbreviated. They can be more referring to the fact that something is complete, major points in the life of the project, and what we use milestones for. Typically, we're not assigning a milestone to someone to do, but these tasks we're assigning resources to do work, and that's why we use that formulation. Okay, we mentioned the fact that one of the things we're going to do is to take a look to see what tasks in this schedule are critical. And critical means that the task cannot slip or it cannot become longer without delaying the overall project. So let's demonstrate that just quickly. And again, look at some of my other short videos on the science, if you like, of critical path analysis. But for now, let's look at a schedule we've put together. And let's click on the Format tab at the top here and just say that we want to see critical tasks, or we want to be identified for us the tasks that are critical. And all of these tasks are ones which, if they slip, will drive out the end of the project. Now, not every task in this schedule is critical. There are quite a few that are not. And you can see by looking at some of these that, yes, they could slip without delaying the project. On the other hand, any of the tasks that are showing as critical here, if they get longer, they will delay the project. So let's show that happening. So here's a project currently finishes 6:14. Let's look at one of the tasks here, conduct needs analysis. It is showing as critical. So according to theory then, if we replan to make that longer, let's make it 7 days. When I click out of this cell, we would expect to see the finish date get longer, and let's see if that happens. Indeed, it does. I added 2 days here, so we added 2 days for the overall project. Let's just undo that with the undo command up here. And what I'd like to do is two other things. Pull this divider to the right. Let's right-click on predecessors, the column heading, and insert the column. And I'm going to hit T on the keyboard and choose total slack. And the number that you see there is the number of days that this task could slip without delaying the project. So logically, any task that says 0 means it cannot slip at all without delaying the project, and therefore it is critical. If I scroll down to where we had some of those blue tasks down here, we can see that this task, we could extend it up to 17 3/4 days. This one almost to 60 days before either of those tasks become critical. And in fact, another way to see what's critical, you could right-click again on the predecessors column. I'm going to insert the column. This time, hit the letter C and choose critical down here. And this will have the word yes in a situation where a task is critical because it has 0 days slack, and no, where a task is not critical because it is not showing any slack. It is showing slack rather. So it's not critical if it does have slack. It is critical if it does not have slack. The value of the slack columns, it tells you exactly how much slack it has, whereas this just tells you it has slack and is not critical. While we're looking at that, you might be spotting what I'm spotting, which is that there's one aspect of this schedule which is not quite good, which is that this task here has a successor. This one theoretically should have a successor, but we haven't linked it in the schedule. And that's why it's showing all that amount of slack, because essentially it's saying that could slip all the way to the end of the project before it delays the project. Well, that almost inevitably is not the case. It should be a little bit more like the task above it. if this is developing unit test plans, it links to something. Well, developing integration test plans should also link to something. So let's fix this issue. And to do so, let's dig in a little bit as to what this task is doing, task 33, so that we can see what 34 should be doing, what the equivalent should be there. So to do that, I'm going to go to the View tab. I'm going to select Details. And the way that split views work, which is what we've created, is whatever task we select in the top part, we see details of at the bottom. And so we see that if we select this task, it tells us task 33, what the resources assigned are. But that's not the version of this form at the bottom that I'd like to see. So what I'm going to do is right-click over in this big gray area, this dead air area, and choose predecessors and successors. I've still got the same task selected at the top, but I'm seeing a variation on the task form at the bottom. So this now tells me that this task here, 33, its predecessor is design complete, and its successor down here is review the modular code. Well, let's look at this one here, the next one. It has a predecessor, the same one, design complete, but it does not have a successor. So let's see if we can find the equivalent successor for this task. So up here, we've got a task which feeds unit testing, review the modular code. This one should feed something equivalent to that in integration testing. Let's remember that it's task 34. Let's go and see what we could be feeding in integration testing. I think this one will be a good successor. So if we select that task, we're going to add a second predecessor to it, which is task 34. And hit OK. What that means, if I go back to task 34, I no longer have a situation where there is no successor, and I see true amount of total slack now. This could slide 32 and 3/4 days before it starts pushing that task down in integration testing we were looking at. Okay, so I see a number of critical paths, a clear, contiguous critical path through the schedule. And I see some other activities which need to be done, but are not driving completion of the project. And that is about what I would expect to see happening. It makes sense to me based on what I know of this project that I put together. It also does make sense to me here that I've got an overlap on these two tasks. Essentially, I'm going to develop code, but I'm not going to do all the development before I do any testing. So the way that this is reflected is that the developer testing, task 30, has task 29 as a predecessor, but with a negative lag. In other words, 75% of the duration of task 29 before it is what I'm going to have as the overlap. So here I've got 15 days is the duration of task 29. So I'm planning to start the developer testing 75% of 15 days before the end of that task. Now that's slightly odd. What I would probably do instead of that is have a start to start with a positive lag. That's probably what I would do. And in fact, let's see if we can just fix that. So let's go 29 SS plus. And for now, let's just say 2D. It won't be exactly the same as it was before, but it's going to be similar. Right, let's make it plus 3 days. And then we're pretty much back to where we were. It just makes more sense to me to be saying something as simple as, I'm going to start doing my testing 3 days after I finish development, after I start development. So I'm going to start testing 3 days after I start developing, as opposed to coming up with some tortuous thing that says something along the lines of, well, I'm going to not wait until the very end of development, but 75% of the duration of development, I'm going to start ahead with my developer testing. It's hard enough even to explain the way that was reflected. I prefer a start-to-start dependency in a situation like that one there. Okay, and if we scroll back up, we've actually saved a day by doing that as well. But what you might have been noticing is that it's fine understanding what the critical path is over here, and it's important to know that. It's important to know which tasks, which, if they get delayed or their durations extend, will blow out the duration of the project. It's always important to know that. And by the way, as soon as you start adding a certain amount of time to some of these tasks, they might become critical down here. They might take over as critical tasks. But the other thing that's been catching your eye, I know, are these little red people down here. So let's hover over one of them and see what it says. It says, this task has over-allocated resources. And this one does as well. Now, it does say right-click for options, and there are various ways you can go about fixing resource over-allocations. But let's take a look first, because I think we can see what's happening here. I've assigned testers to work on this and testers to work on that at the same time. And if I've only got one tester, then that's probably not doable. The other thing I can see quite easily here is I can probably fix this fairly easily simply by delaying one or other of those tasks. They're not critical, and neither of them is going to become critical for several days. This one would have to slip 17 days before it becomes critical. This one, 32 days. And I probably only need to slip it 4 days to get rid of that overlap there. But before jumping to conclusions, let's take a look at our resource sheet. So let's go to View and Resource Sheet here. And what this is telling us, again, that certain resources are over-allocated, including the testers that we were just looking at. Now, when this resource sheet was put together, essentially, we said we have one tester, 100% of a tester. Any more than 100% worth of a tester's time means we're over-allocated. Well, let's see how bad the situation is. So on the standard rate column here, just right-click and insert the column and choose P for peak. And what that's telling me is that at least somewhere in the schedule, and we actually know where it was because we were looking at it, testers are allocated to 200%. So what we could do is we could say, well, let's get another tester then. Let's have 2 testers. That's going to fix the issue. But probably that's overkill because I can make that all happen with one tester as long as I stagger the tasks a little bit. So let's go back and let's see how we can interactively fix this situation by moving tasks around. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to split this view again so that I've got this at the top, and then at the bottom, I want to see all the assignments that each of the resources have got assigned to them. So let's select testers. On the View tab, let's go to Details here. And then rather than sort of trying to change down here, let's, where it says Details to the right, instead of the resource form, let's go to Gantt charts. Again, remember, whatever you select in the top view of a split view, you see detail of at the bottom. So I've selected testers up here. Here are the tasks which are assigned to the testers. They're assigned to some critical tasks, and they're assigned to some non-critical tasks up here. Let me just scroll over. And the good news for us anyway is that it's the non-critical tasks where we've got an overlap. So probably what I would like to see happen is we'll just delay this task a few days, 4 days or more, and there won't be an overlap. And it still won't become critical because I've got 32 days of total slack there. So let's see if we can make that happen. Let's let the tool do that for us. Let's go to Resource up here. And let me just scroll, make sure all the resources are shown up here. So I've clicked Resource, and now I'll click Level Resource. Project assumes it's the testers I want to level because I got them selected there. When I hit Level Now, what I'm expecting will happen is that this task will push to the right. Let's see if it does that. And having done that, neither of these tasks will have over-allocated resources anymore. So let's hit Level Now. And indeed, that's what happened. This task delayed, it wasn't critical and is still not critical. Therefore, it has not delayed the endpoint of my project, and therefore I'm quite happy with what that's done for me. And I don't have that issue with testers anymore. Let's look at trainers. They're showing us over-allocated. In fact, a little bit more significantly over-allocated. We need 3. Well, that's because we're allocating a trainer, trainer, trainer. And if I've only got 1, then that trainer is 300% over-allocated. Let's just scroll down here, see if we've got any others. No, there's no other over-allocations on the trainers. These tasks are not critical. They've got 21 days of slack each. I think I can just stagger those without causing a problem. So let's see, trainers, level resource, level now. Yep, that fixed it. Not over-allocated, and nothing has become critical here. Let's see what else we've got. Let's click on developer. And here we've got that situation that we were looking at before where we've got an overlap of tasks. So I could think about delaying so there's no overlap, but notice both of these are critical. And so if I do slide that out by about 10 days, a little bit under 10 days, I'm going to delay my project by that amount because we've got the critical tasks. The definition of critical means that they don't have any slack. And therefore, if they slip or if they get pushed by leveling, it is going to delay the project. Now, that might be okay with you. You might want to go back to the boss and say, look, we're going to have to take a couple of extra days on this project. But I would propose something else that, in my case, I would like to actually see this as 2 separate people. I'd like to have a level of sanity checking, if you like. I don't really like to see someone testing their own stuff. I like to see someone else testing what another developer has done. So in this case, I am actually going to say I need a second tester. So I'm going to put 200 there. So my team will consist of 2 developers, I meant to say. So I want to get another developer. I don't want someone testing their own stuff. So a developer is going to develop the code and a developer is going to test, but it's going to be a different developer. So I haven't pushed out the project. I just gotten hold of another developer. Now, as we get closer to actually doing this, then instead of just saying developer and developer, I would probably change these out to have named individuals on there. Let's take a look at technical communicators. Now, I'm looking at this down here and thinking, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to fix this by just delaying things. In fact, I'm almost certain I'm not going to be able to fix this by delaying things because the amount of slack available and the duration of some of these tasks, I don't think one technical communicator can handle all of that, even if I start spreading things out without delaying the project. In fact, let's see what will happen. Let's go to technical communicators and tell project, level that resource and see what it says. Well, it will tell me it's actually not able to fix everything. Not only that, if I say, well, do the best you can, it starts splitting tasks for me. Not only that, it's made developing the help system and reviewing documentation on the critical path. It's made those tasks critical. And that doesn't make any sense to me either. I don't want a schedule where everything is delayed and we're not going to get done simply because we've got documentation on the critical path. I need to make sure that documentation can be done, but it's not critical. So I'm going to undo that change I just made. And again, I'm going to take the approach that I'm going to earmark having some extra technical communicators. In fact, I'm going to say to the sponsor, there's a possibility I might need up to 3. But if I click back on them right now, I haven't made anything critical. And by saying I do have 3 available, then I've got no over-allocations. In fact, I've got no resource over-allocations at all right now. So I'm going to remove the split. I'm going to go back to View. I'm going to undo Details. And I'm going to go from the resource sheet back to the Gantt chart. Now what I would do is I would go back and just look at various durations. Does it make sense to have 5 days for conducting needs analysis? Do I need more or less? And I would double check everything, looking for durations. I would look for various dates to see, yeah, that's about what I was expecting to get development done in middle part of April, and look for any surprises. When you first laid this out, you might have had an idea in your mind about when, for example, integration testing would be complete and when you would be able to get the training done. But when you look in detail, maybe you need to make some adjustments. But assuming that you are at a position that you have confidence in this schedule and you're ready to go to the boss and say, okay, it looks like I can get this done by 6:13. In fact, I shaved a day off when I did a review. I changed some of the logic and I can get this done for you by 6:13. And the boss says, okay, well, before I say yes or no, how much work is assigned in total to get all of this done? Well, let's right click on the start column and insert the column W. And let's look at work. And you can say it's a little bit over 1,500 hours of work to get all this stuff done. And it's at that point, of course, the boss might have some discussions with you about, well, can we shave some of that off? Or they might say, well, you know what? I was expecting a little bit more. What if you got hold of some extra resources? Could you get this done quicker if I gave you additional resources? And there would be a dialogue backwards and forwards with your project sponsor, no doubt. They might also say, and how much is all that going to cost? Well, let's insert the column, right click and insert the column C for cost. And let's make sure we get cost. And it says 0. And the reason for that is, if we go back to the resource sheet, is we haven't told project how much it costs to use resources. Now, you may not do that. You may decide that for whatever reason, rates are sensitive. Bear in mind, this is never going to be someone's actual salary here. This is going to be what it costs to use that resource. If it's an internal resource, there's all sorts of overheads. Even if it's a contracted resource, again, it's probably not what the person is being paid. It's what you're being billed for that contracted resource. But just to show that project can calculate the overall cost of activities, let's put in, let's say, a standard rate of $50 an hour, that resource. And then let's use that little fill handle to fill down for everybody to be the same. Notice, by the way, a fill handle in project functions slightly differently from Excel. If I were to, if this were Excel and I were to drag that down, it would have gone 51, 52, 53, and so on. But project just duplicates the value down. So if I go back to my Gantt chart now, you'll see that every activity that has resources assigned has a cost calculated on the rate multiplied by the number of hours, and everything rolls up. So these tasks roll up to this summary task, these tasks roll up to this summary task, and all the summary tasks roll up to the overall cost of the project. And again, at that point, there may be some dialogue about making adjustments. But assuming you get to a point where the boss says, okay, I'm happy, let's roll. What you probably want to do is make sure that you've made a note of all of the dates that the boss actually approved and therefore that the boss is expecting. So the boss says, I'm approving all of this, and that is what the boss is expecting to happen, all of these activities to start and finish here. But once the project starts, of course, some things might take longer, some things might take less, and you might have to change the plan going forward for all sorts of reasons. And you start to drift away from the currently approved dates, maybe for the worse, maybe for the better. And maybe some tasks will be for the better and some will be for the worse. But either way, it's always going to be helpful to know what the baseline approved dates were, so that when we track progress, and we'll see in a subsequent video how we actually go about tracking progress, looking for variances and making adjustments. As we do that, we know what the original plan was. So let's set a baseline. Before you start getting concerned because you've heard other people say that baselining is complicated, it really isn't. In fact, I'm going to show you what baselining does and therefore why it's helpful. What I'd like you to do is right-click on the total slack column, insert the column baseline start. Here we go. You can just sort of go down to it. And right-click total slack again and insert the column baseline finish. You probably guessed that's what I was going to say next. Well, right now, by the way, when you do, make sure it's baseline finish, not baseline 1 finish, baseline 2 finish. There's a lot of fields that have the word baseline associated with them. But right now, they say NA, and the reason is that I haven't set the baseline. When I do set the baseline, all that's going to happen is the contents of the start column is going to be copied over into the baseline start column, and the contents of the finish column are going to be copied over into baseline finish, and they will stay those same dates unless I re-baseline. On the other hand, the planned dates can change for all sorts of reasons, but the baseline dates won't change. So let's firstly see baselining happen. Let's go to Project. Let's go to Set Baseline again, and just allow all the defaults to populate. Click OK. And exactly what I said, these pairs of dates here got copied into these columns over here. But if I subsequently change a date, a planned date, it will not change the baseline dates until I re-baseline at some point. Even better is that in addition to showing the dates here, you can display the baseline dates over on the Gantt chart. And the way to do that is to go to Format up here. Click Baseline. Here we're not setting a baseline. What we're doing is displaying a baseline. And you'll notice that for all of the bars over here, in addition to the original planned dates, we've now got the baseline dates. You can even hover and it tells you what it is that you're looking at. Right now, everything is one and the same because we haven't changed anything. But let's say you just got rolling on your project and you're just working up here, working on this, and the requirements analyst comes along and says, hey, boss, I'm going to need 7 days for that task. And you say, well, let's see what the impact would be. You put in 7, and you immediately see the impact over here. Because it's a critical task, it delays everything after it. The start and finish of every other task is pushed out as a result. And you can see the extent of the delay over here. Now, you probably just wouldn't roll over and say, okay, we'll just accept that then. What you would do is you would look to see further downstream to see if you can catch up anywhere, shaving some time off some of these other durations. Or you might go back to the boss and say, there's nothing I can do about it. We are now going to be a couple of days later, and then negotiate a new baseline or some combination of the two. Notice, incidentally, when I changed this cell, everything impacted was highlighted in pale blue over here. So the finish of that task and the start and finish of all subsequent critical tasks and the overall project finish date and finish duration. And in fact, the cost changed as well because a task which has here that has resource assigned to it, the amount of work increased. Okay, so let's, and therefore the cost of that one increased as well. So at this point, we've gone through a number of steps associated with having confidence that you can approach your project sponsor, get approval, and then baseline so that in subsequent actions on the project, you can be measuring variances against what was baselined and making adjustments accordingly. In fact, one of my next videos does explain the procedures by which we can update progress, look for variances, and make adjustments accordingly. In fact, shortly I'll be showing you a list of the other videos in the series. For now, though, let's take a look at what we covered in this lesson. So the overall topic was making sure that we understand our project, we fine-tune it, we analyze it, we make adjustments, and get ready to track progress through baselining. Specifically, we made sure we knew which tasks were critical and what critical means. We looked for resource over-allocations and the types of things that we can do to resolve them. We did a general pass through the schedule to look for any things that just didn't seem to work from a bottleneck or durations and dates point of view. And then we baselined our schedule. So again, if you did get value from this lesson and from any of the others, just like them if you would. Think about subscribing, letting other people know about the existence of the course. think again about buying me a coffee. I need one even more now than I did when I started this particular session. But if not, if you don't feel like going to buymeacoffee.com/thegantlot and buying me a coffee, that's perfectly fine. I'll get my own coffee and you can just get value from the course and I'll be happy with that. I mentioned the fact that there are other lessons in the course. The very next one, in fact, is what we do once we have set a baseline and the project starts to unfold. I do have an introduction and overview video that tells you what's basically the features of each of these lessons. But just like with this lesson, at the beginning of the lesson, I'll give you a heads up as to what's going to be covered. So for those of you who watch this, thank you very much. I will look forward to seeing you back at one of my future lessons. Thanks very much.